What's going on YouTube? Welcome to my channel Money Moves with Kay. I'm Kay, and today we're going to talk about the appraisal process, and I'm going to give you 5 tips plus a bonus, so stay towards the end of the video. I'm going to give you 5 appraisal tips that we just went through that will help you with the appraisal process with an already existing home or a new construction home. So if that's something that you're interested in, please stay tuned for the video. All right, so I'll list top 5 things about the appraisal process that you may need to know, whether you're doing a construction loan or you're just pretty much having an appraiser come out to an already existing home, okay? So top 5 reasons. So please be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and also ring the bell notification so you're able to get everything that I upload and follow the journey of creating an Airbnb from scratch. So number 5, most people really don't know that you have to actually pay for your own appraisal. There may be ways that you could wrap it in, but even with this property that I'm in, they actually made us pay for the appraisal. They meaning the mortgage company, okay? So out of pocket, that's an out of pocket expense you need to account for. How much is an appraisal? Well, it will vary depending on where you are in the country. But for us in this area of North Carolina, the appraisal in our area and county, our appraisal was, this go around was $575. Typically, an appraisal in this area ranges, it starts at about $500, right? So that goes back to another video I did with the VA process. And again, we're using a VA loan to fund this property and our next property. But you have to have some of that cash on hand is my point. Because you may think, well, I have no down payment, or I have already got my cash to close and I'm good to go. Well, they're going to be expenses such as an inspection, the appraisal, just to name a few of out-of-pocket expenses that you need outside of your closing costs expenses. So make sure you have that money on hand. That's something that before we started to get into real estate, we didn't know. We just thought, okay, well, everything's paid for. We just go along our day. But no, that's an out-of-pocket expense that the mortgage lender will actually ask you to pretty much fork out. So keep that in mind. All right, so the 4th tip I want to give to you about the appraisal process is that square footage matters, okay? So it does matter. So in this particular case, we're adding a guest house onto our property, which means that increases the square footage. So the more square footage, the better. If you can, the better. Not necessarily saying there, other factors won't be included in that, because they will. But the square footage does increase the value of your property. So keep that in mind when you are looking for properties that already exist, or you're going into the construction phase of your property, because that is very, very key. All right, so number 3, make sure that you look at comps in the area. Comps are basically, you're looking at something that equates or is equal, a house that is equal to your house. So if you have a ranch style home, you're looking at some other ranch style homes within the area. For us, we have a home with a guest house attached to it. So what I did a little bit of research before we even purchased the second plot of land that we have. I did a little bit of research, and the research said basically that there was multiple homes that had an attached or detached guest house situation, and the appraisal was high. So I knew that the appraisal for our particular property would be pretty high as well, because of me looking at another home with a guest house. Now, in this particular case, and I actually have the appraisal right here. In this particular case, it does not always have to be an additional guest house or, apples to apples, because sometimes you may not find that in the area. But I do want you to take into consideration that they do look at the amount of bedrooms, the amount of bathrooms, the amount of square footage, as I mentioned earlier. Some other key factors in a home, such as, does it have an extra bedroom? Does it have extra this or that? Or what are the upgrades in the particular home that are there? Is it a new construction? Our home is going to be a new construction home. So that's what they look at too. So it's not just about apples to apples, oranges to oranges, because honestly, especially if you live in a rural area, you may not have a comp that, is equal to yours within miles away. So it can kind of be very difficult. But these appraisals are experienced, and they kind of know how to go forth with that. Now, the key thing here is to think about your comps within 2 miles. That's exactly what this appraiser did. He looked within 2 miles of our property, our said property, subject property. And he said, okay, within 2 miles, what do I see that can be equal or greater, but mainly equal in this particular case. What could be equal or around the same classifications as this particular home that I'm looking at? And bingo, that's how he came up with his appraisal. And what he did was he took about 2 to 3, actually he took 3. He took 3 homes and he said, okay, well, based on these 3 homes that I have that are somewhat similar as can be, this is you guys' appraisal. And luckily, thankfully, thank you, Jesus, the appraisal came in much higher than we were purchasing the property for. So we are good to go. And I'll talk about that on my next tip. All right, so the second tip is to basically do your research. I mentioned this in the last tip. I did a little bit of research for the new property, the new construction property, in order to see what was in the area. So what are you researching now? What are you researching? If I'm telling you to research, what exactly do you need to be looking for? You need to look in an area within 2 miles again, approximately. Look in the area that you are planning to build. If you're building, if it's an already existing home, you can use some of these tips as well. But if it's a new construction, look in an area that can support the price point of your home. For instance, if I want a $700,000 home, $1 million home, and I'm going into an area where mainly the majority of the comps are $120,000, there's nothing wrong with a $120,000 home. Please believe me and trust me. But if you're trying to build a $1 million home in a $120,000 home neighborhood, you could come across some problems with the appraisal. Now, I'll kind of discuss in just a second what those problems could be as far as what you would need to do. What are the next steps you would have to take in order to still get that $1 million home if that's what you wanted, right? So you want to make sure that you have, or the area that you choose to build a new property supports the price point of your subject property, the property that you're going to build, okay? So getting back to what I said earlier. So what if the appraisal comes in much lower than the actual, home value? So let's use that example again of $1 million, which is very extreme, $1 million home in a $120,000 neighborhood, right? So if that were to happen, then that particular person would have to say 2 things, 2 main things. They would have to say, okay, I'm going to have to take off some of the additions of this $1 million home. I know I wanted a jacuzzi. I know I wanted a pool. I know I wanted this, that. And they're going to have to do a lot of subtractions to try to, narrow it down. But you would have to honestly deduct some of your improvements to the home in order to get it as close as possible to what the appraised area or price point is, right? So that may be a ton of work, right? That's one thing you could do. The other thing you would have to do, if you had the money, is simply come in with the difference, right? So if you're in a $120,000 home neighborhood and your home comes in at a whopping $1 million, the cost to build it, then you're going to have to come in with the difference at closing, which is a huge difference for closing. But if you have that money, you got that money. It's not a big deal. But for those, average Joes out here, just like myself and my husband, we pretty much wanted to make sure that our appraisal came in higher than the cost to build the property. And that's exactly what happened. So again, that was awesome. And we're excited to move forward with the process. But those are 2 key things that clearly we didn't know coming into it. I knew that the appraisal had to be high, but I didn't know the repercussions of it not being high, right? So luckily everything worked out, but I want to give you a heads up on that so you know what to look for when it's your time to purchase a home or to do a new construction home. All right, so we're down to tip number 1. Tip number 1, and I have an additional tip, but tip number 1 is to own your own land. If you have been following the journey of us creating an Airbnb from scratch, you already know that we had a plot of land for $4,000. It was an acre land, but it was a little too slopey. So the builder was like, we can't build on that. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we found another piece of land. Now, the second piece of land, we did not pay for it cash. We actually just included that land, whatever we found, and we included it into the loan. So I say that to say this. If you already have your land cash purchased for, right? The cool thing about purchasing land, even in the appraisal process, so that'll kind of tie in here. The cool thing about purchasing land cash and you owning it outright is that you can use the equity in that land to serve as a down payment to the home, right? So that's a really cool aspect. Again, before this process happened, we didn't know anything about, right? So because we had to include the land into our final construction of the home, that increased the amount that it would cost to build the home, okay? Which means that the appraisal could have been a lot higher. The equity in the home could have been a lot higher if we had just went with the $4,000 cash land, and we wouldn't have had to tack on X amount of dollars to our ultimate loan. All right, so that's just a good tip about the appraisal process as well, is making sure, if you can, when you're doing a new construction, own your land, because it will make the difference a lot wider. That makes sense. So your appraisal will pretty much be higher, and you can have more equity moving into the property than if you had a higher cost to construct your property. All right, so here's a bonus tip I want to add to you guys to provide value. A bonus tip is to ensure that your credit is in good standing. What is good standing? You want to make sure, in order to purchase a property, you can purchase the property with at least a 680. That'll get you a decent, not the best interest rate, right? That'll kind of get you in the door. If you have something lower than that, you may still be able to purchase a property there are tons of programs out here for first-time home buyers with low credit and some other things, but your interest rate may be still a little higher. So you want to make sure your credit is G to G, good to go, and your interest rate is a lot lower. So we're looking at the 750s and above if you can, but 680 will kind of get you in the door. Now, I want to say this real quick because this is a crucial bonus tip. If you are purchasing a property with a spouse or a partner or whatever the case may be, some people go in partnerships, as far as like investors kind of go in partnership and purchase the property using the lender, you going through having a mortgage, going through a lender. If you do that, they're going to look at both of you guys' credit, but they're going to base the loan and the interest of the loan based on the person with the lower credit, right? So let's say, for instance, you got a husband and wife who goes in and try to purchase a property. The wife has a 750 credit score. The husband has a 580. Okay, so if that's the case, then they're going to say, okay, husband, we're going to take your credit score and base our loan off of the lower credit score here. So it's very, very crucial. If you're going into a home with a partner or a spouse or whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that both of you guys have pretty decent credit, because they will be looking at the lower of the two credit scores. And speaking of credit scores, what I did was I created a coloring book for kids to teach kids about credit. This is Credit is Queen Charlene and Credit is King Kareem. These two books are available on Amazon. Please go check them out. They were inspired by my daughter, my 4-year-old. She asked me one day, "Mommy, what is credit?" And I was like, "Baby, I know how to explain to adults, but how do I put that in a kid term?" And within 2 weeks, I had an idea, and I put the idea forth. So go check out, support the books if you can. They're on Amazon. I'll link below so you have direct access to the books. All right, that's my video on the appraisal process. I hope you were provided with value so you can know what to look for when you go through the appraisal process. And before I leave, I want to give a special shout out to the Man Down podcast network. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And below, write in the comments, "I subscribed," and I'll be sure to shout you out. Until next time, guys, you stay blessed. Peace.